The wind scraped across the dusty stones of Gotarandura like a whisper from an ancient ghost, stirring the brown leaves that clung desperately to the dry earth. Theresa Sanchez de Cepeda y Ahumada knelt behind the family house, her knees buried in the gravel like roots trying to anchor themselves in uncertainty. The Spanish sun above was no longer soft. It scalded everything it touched, the roof tiles, the dry air, and even her thoughts. She was just a little girl, no more than 7, but her heart beat with the drama of someone who had already tasted the terror of forever. She was trying to be holy, whatever that meant. Her fingers clutched a small wooden cross she had made from sticks and twine. Her eyes stared off toward the empty road that led somewhere far. Somewhere without sin. Somewhere she thought maybe heaven would begin. She had tried to run away once, dragging her younger brother Rodrigo along. The plan had been noble in her mind. To travel to the land of the Moors and die as martyrs. Die for God. It seemed so easy in stories. Saints always died beautifully. With light around them. With peace in their faces. But the road had frightened them. Too quiet. Too long. Too unknown. They had turned back when their uncle found them at the edge of town and brought them home. But Theresa remembered the feeling, that racing in her chest, that sense that she was walking out of a world she didn't belong to. She didn't cry when she was caught. She didn't explain. She just looked at the horizon one last time before the house swallowed her again. At night, Theresa would lie in bed and try not to breathe too loudly. The walls of their home were thin, and she could hear everything, the clinking of spoons, the low murmurs of her parents, the groaning of tired wood beneath the floorboards. But beneath it all, she always imagined something else, whispers not from this world. A voice that came from the stars or maybe from deep inside her own soul. She didn't understand it, but she feared ignoring it. Something was calling her. Something holy. Something dangerous. Her father was a man of strong principles. He read books in Latin and frowned a lot. Her mother was softer, tender, and always smelled of olive oil and ink. She had loved reading tales of knights and saints, and Theresa inherited that passion like a secret torch passed in the dark. But when her mother died, when the house suddenly felt colder and her father grew even quieter, Theresa felt something unravel in her chest. It was like the sky had dropped a little lower and pressed down on her. She stopped reading for pleasure. She started reading to survive. In the years that followed, Theresa tried hard to become a good woman, not the kind people clapped for, but the kind God might notice. She went to the convent school, learned how to sew and write, and began shaping her face into something pleasant and obedient. But inside her, a war was brewing. A storm that didn't show on her face. She began praying too hard. Fasting too long. Hurting herself quietly as if pain could make her holy. She smiled through the hunger. She walked straight through headaches. But her body started to fail. One collapse turned into 2. Soon, her father pulled her from the convent and brought her home. He thought she needed rest. He didn't understand that she was trying to leave this world from the inside out. Theresa lay in bed for days, sometimes weeks. Her limbs numb, her heart pounding with no rhythm, her breath coming like she was underwater. Doctors said it was illness. Some thought it might be madness. But Theresa knew it was neither. It was longing. Longing for something not made of flesh or stone. At the height of her sickness, she slipped into what felt like death. No heartbeat, no breath, no motion. Her family thought she had passed. Her grave was even dug. But on the 3rd day, she opened her eyes again. She came back, but something in her had changed. She had been somewhere else. Somewhere beyond pain and sound. Her recovery was slow. Her limbs trembled when she walked. But her mind, oh, her mind burned like fire trapped in glass. Visions began. Strange, unexplainable moments. Sometimes she saw a light that wasn't there. Sometimes she heard things no one else could. She tried to hide it. She thought maybe it was pride, or worse, deception. But the visions persisted. They didn't ask for permission. They tore through her thoughts like lightning splitting a sky. God was no longer a distant echo in her books, he was near. Too near. His presence wasn't always gentle. It crushed her, shattered her calm. And still, she longed for more. When she returned to the convent, she did not go back as the same girl who had left. She was quieter now. Less eager to please. More eager to vanish. She prayed not to be seen. She served in silence. But even her silence carried a strange weight. People began to notice. Not her words, but her presence. Some felt comforted. Others disturbed. Theresa herself often wanted to run. Her visions grew more intense. She sometimes saw angels. Sometimes demons. Sometimes her own soul hanging by a thread between the two. It was exhausting. It was beautiful. It was unbearable. As the years turned, she became a Carmelite nun. A sister among many. But the convent life disturbed her. Not because of strictness, but because it wasn't strict enough. The halls were filled with idle chatter, visits from nobles, and the clutter of wealth. She felt herself slipping again. Distracted. Weighed down. Her soul, which once flew toward God like a hawk to the sky, now crawled through velvet and gossip. She begged for mercy. She begged to be changed. And one night, it happened. She was kneeling in the chapel. Alone. Cold stone beneath her knees, candlelight flickering like a heartbeat. Then, a searing presence. Like the sun exploded inside her chest. She could not move. She could not think. Only feel. It was as if love itself had entered her bones and set them aflame. A wound, not of blood, but of fire, burned in her heart. She felt pierced by divine love. It was ecstasy and agony at once. That moment changed everything. But not everyone believed her. Some feared her. Others accused her of being misled. In Spain, the Inquisition watched closely. A woman claiming visions could be branded a liar, or worse, a heretic. Theresa began writing. Not for fame, but to survive. To prove her soul was real. That her experiences were true. Her words spilled onto parchment like tears. Deep, bold, unsettling words about love, suffering, union with God. Her writings carried fire. Too much fire for some. But they also brought healing to those who had forgotten how to hope. She saw that the convents needed reform. They were too lax. Too worldly. Too distracted. She believed that nuns should live simply. Poorly. In silence and prayer. She began a mission to rebuild the Carmelite order from within. Many opposed her. Priests. Nobles. Even other nuns. She was mocked, threatened, insulted. But she kept going. Village by village. Convent by convent. On foot. In pain. With humor and sharp wit. Theresa didn't just build new convents, she tore down old habits. She made holiness something that bled and laughed, and cried and burned. Something real. And all the while she suffered. Her body grew frail. Her health never returned fully. But her spirit, oh, her spirit was iron beneath silk. She had seen too much of God to turn away now. She would keep walking until the very ground gave way beneath her. And when it did, she hoped her fall would land her in eternity. The roads Theresa traveled were narrow and harsh, carved through dust and stone, winding across the mountains of Castile like veins of stubborn hope. Her sandals wore thin, but her will never did. She moved from town to town, her body betraying her with every mile, stomach twisted with sickness, bones aching from sleepless nights, fevers that danced at the edges of her vision. But she smiled often, though the smile always looked like it was hiding something, not a secret, but a weight. She was tired, but not of the mission. She was tired of carrying it alone. People called her names: troublemaker, stubborn woman, pretender, heretic. She had no wealth to bribe them. No beauty to seduce them. No army to protect her. Only truth. And truth, as she had learned, was not always welcome. Especially not from a woman. Especially not one who claimed to hear the voice of God. Still, she walked. She founded her first Reformed convent in Avila, the city of her childhood. San Jose. A place of silence, discipline, and devotion. No silk, no feasts, no visitors. Only prayer. Only poverty. Only purpose. It was not grand. It was not comfortable. But it was sacred. And from there, something began to spread, not like a wildfire, but like a holy infection. Other young women came. Women who were also tired of noise. Tired of pretending. They came not because Theresa made religion attractive, but because she made it real. But every step forward brought resistance. Letters full of warnings. Eyes full of judgment. Voices whispering behind closed doors. Bishops doubted her. Nuns envied her. Men in power tried to silence her. Some accused her of witchcraft, others of pride. But Theresa had learned long ago that being misunderstood was part of the cost. She didn't flinch. She wrote more. Traveled more. Prayed harder. Laughed louder. And still, the visions continued. There were moments she would fall into ecstasy mid-prayer, her body frozen, her soul flying through realms beyond comprehension. Her face would light up with a joy not found on earth. Others witnessed it and trembled. Some thought she was possessed. Others wept, sensing the presence of heaven nearby. But Theresa knew it wasn't for show. These moments were as terrifying as they were beautiful. God was not tame. He did not fit into human language. She once said it felt like being lifted by a force she could not resist, her soul pulled out of her body like thread from a needle. But after every vision came the return, the crash into her aching flesh, the pounding headaches, the loneliness of being alive again. No one saw that part. No one saw her weep into her pillow at night, begging God not to leave her. She never asked for the visions. She only asked to be faithful. That was the difference. She didn't want glory. She wanted truth. The years passed, and Theresa founded more convents. Salamanca, Toledo, Segovia, Seville. The map of Spain slowly changed, not with politics, but with prayer. Each house was a seed planted in hard ground. Some took root easily. Others fought her every step. There were nights she slept on the floor of a cold room, stomach empty, surrounded by dust and silence. Other nights, she sat by candlelight, writing feverishly, pages and pages of spiritual insight that would one day feed nations. She wrote with the honesty of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to lose. Her words were not safe. She spoke of love that hurt, of suffering that purifies, of a God who demands everything and then gives even more. She described the soul like a castle with many rooms, some dark, some filled with light, and the journey inward as the path to true union with God. Her writings were not instructions. They were wounds. Open, bleeding, holy. But behind the wisdom was always pain. Theresa never stopped suffering. Her heart raced unpredictably. Her headaches roared like thunder. She often vomited without cause, her insides twisted with invisible fire. And still, she refused to rest. She had no time. Souls were waiting. Lives were drifting. She believed every moment wasted could mean another person never discovering what she had found. Her mission wasn't a project. It was a lifeline. And then came John. He was young. Quiet. A Carmelite friar with a fire in his eyes and chains on his soul. When Theresa met him, she recognized something, not familiarity, but hunger. He, too, had tasted God and found the world lacking. Together, they dreamed bigger. She encouraged him to begin reforming the male branch of the Carmelites. It was dangerous. It was bold. But it was necessary. And so, the Descalced Carmelites were born, descalced, meaning barefoot, symbolizing total poverty and surrender. Their alliance was not easy. They were both stubborn, both intense. But they trusted each other. They pushed each other. They became spiritual co-laborers in a war not fought with weapons, but with prayer and pen. But war is war. And it came. John was arrested. thrown into a dark cell by his own religious brothers. They called him a rebel, a traitor. They whipped him, starved him, tried to break him. But John wrote poetry in the dark, prayers in blood, and he survived. Theresa was devastated. Not just for him, but for what it meant. That even among God's people, cruelty thrived. That holiness made you a threat. Still, she pressed on. She aged quickly. Her body weakened. Her handwriting grew shakier. But her voice never dimmed. She wrote one final book, her autobiography, at the request of her superiors. It was more than a life story. It was a spiritual road map. A confession. A burning bush in ink. And always, the conflict returned. Accusations. Investigations. Suspicion. The Inquisition kept watch, as if waiting for her to slip. But she didn't. Not because she was flawless, but because she was faithful. Her humility confused her enemies. Her courage frightened them. Her holiness was too inconvenient to ignore. Her last years were spent on the road, founding convents, mentoring sisters, navigating storms of criticism with a grin and a shrug. She would sometimes collapse mid-journey, her body giving out in the dust. But she would rise again, gripping her rosary, muttering prayers through clenched teeth. She was not a saint in stained glass. She was a woman with dirt under her nails and fire in her bones. The more she suffered, the more she smiled. Not because she enjoyed pain, but because she had seen the other side. She had seen what most of us can only guess at. She had seen the face of the one who made her. And she could not unsee it. And yet, she remained human. She got impatient. She sometimes doubted. She worried about small things. She scolded her nuns when they got lazy. She joked about how bad her food tasted. She even feared death. Not because of punishment, but because of the unknown. But deep down, she trusted. Not in herself, but in the one who had carried her through visions and illness, praise and rejection, silence and ecstasy. The road was ending. She could feel it. Her legs no longer obeyed. Her nights grew longer. Her prayers shorter. And yet peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of surrender. She had done what she was sent to do. P. The air in Alba de Tormes was heavy. It was early October, and the winds had begun to change, brushing the treetops with whispers that sounded like prayers half remembered. Theresa lay in a small room inside the convent she had founded, her last foundation. The stone walls were pale and bare, and a single wooden cross hung above her bed, crooked but sincere. Her breath had slowed. Her fingers curled gently around the beads of her rosary, though she no longer moved them. Each breath she took sounded like a thread fraying. No one said it aloud, but they all knew. The time had come. Her body had grown paper-thin. Her face had sunken in like a dried rose pressed between the pages of time. Her voice had quieted, no longer filling the room with sharp wit or fierce rebuke. But her presence had not weakened. It radiated stronger now, still, grounded, rooted in something beyond the reach of death. She had not run from suffering, she had carried it like a torch. Now that torch flickered low, but its heat lingered in every corner of the convent. Theresa had never feared death the way others did. She feared disobedience more than dying. But now, lying in this quiet room, surrounded by silence and soft weeping behind the walls, a final kind of surrender settled over her. It was not fear. It was not doubt. It was release. She had walked through fire, and now the fire would carry her home. The day was October 4th, 1582. Or perhaps October 15th. That was the strange thing. The night she died, the Gregorian calendar replaced the Julian one. Skipping 10 days. The world changed time, as if even the calendar had to shift when Theresa left it. The moment she passed was not dramatic. No angels tore through the roof. No thunder shook the skies. It was quiet. Simple. Like a candle going out. But those who stood near her knew something unseen had moved. Something eternal had brushed the room. Her body remained, but something deeper, the thing that had set her apart, the thing that burned and laughed and defied the world, had risen. Words spread quickly. Not just in Spain, but beyond. The woman many had feared, mocked, misunderstood, was gone. But the impact remained. The convents she built stood strong. The books she wrote continued to pass from hand to hand like sacred relics. Her legacy was not statues and titles. It was souls rekindled, lives rebuilt, hearts reopened to God. And what of her works? What did she leave behind? She left a map, not of roads or kingdoms, but of the human soul. She had spoken of the interior castle, where the soul is like a great palace with many rooms, and the journey to God was not far away but deep within. She taught that prayer was not just words, it was surrender, silence, struggle, and sometimes, even suffering. She showed that the holiest people were often the most human, the most broken, the most desperate. She taught that love was painful, but worth it. That real holiness didn't look like perfection. It looked like persistence. Falling and rising. Again and again. She showed the world that God could be found not in perfection, but in persistence. Not in power, but in poverty of spirit. Her writings warned of pride, especially spiritual pride. She taught that visions, miracles, and ecstasies meant nothing without humility. She reminded her nuns that it was better to peel potatoes with love than to levitate in pride. She taught that obedience was not slavery, but a path to freedom. That silence was not emptiness, but fullness waiting to bloom.